Hello guys and welcome to this little horrible horror special. I'm often asked to name some of the more good horror movies or asked what my all-time favorites are. However, first of all, that's not really the point of the show, and I do try to talk about a few in recently seen on the occasions that I make them. And in general, I suck quite hard at picking favorites. Simply because there are always so many movies out there that I like for marginally different reasons, and more will always come. However, I thought that I could at least do this much. This video is a quick little rundown of the 5 movies I watched in 2011 that I personally thought were the scariest. Mind you, as with all of my other lists, this is a personal list. It's not a list of scariest movies I've ever seen, or a list of scariest movies released in 2011, or a list of scariest movies ever of all time. This is just the scariest 5 out of the ones I watched last year, regardless of whether or not I've seen them before. Alright? Let's take a look then. John Carpenter is one of the people that most consistently scares me with his movies. Sure, there's a blunder now and then, but this is a man who knows how to make a movie that sticks with you for a while. And while The Thing is by far the more popular movie in what he calls his Apocalypse trilogy, and definitely a frightening and very impressive movie, Prince of Darkness deserves equal attention. And so does In the Mouth of Madness, but we're talking about this one right now. How do I best describe Prince of Darkness? Well, the premise is simple. Satan is real, and the church has been keeping him in a jar for millennia. And he's about to wake up. If that's not a major oh shit scenario, I just don't know what is. But what makes it work is the various theories about this thing's existence that we are presented with, and the simple aspect of the movie that everything can and does happen. It's a film that doesn't give a fuck what you think, and gives you such a different view of what the devil is, that you will at one point scratch your head. And then decide it doesn't matter, because it's pure evil and it will get you. Of course, it doesn't hurt to earn some extra cool points by having Alice Cooper play a possessed hobo, or by having horror favorite Donald Pleasence give one of those doom speeches he was so amazing at delivering in the first scene. In general, Carpenter's apocalypse films are a great and frightening watch, operating entirely on giving you the goddamn creeps at any costs. And it works wonderfully. Hats off, Carpenter. I know I say I rarely pick favorites, but Candyman has always been seriously up for consideration. Having read the short story, it's a great expansion of an already creepy tale, aided very much by the frightening imagery and Tony Todd's deep, terrifying voice. It's a movie that's really only hampered by a pretty crappy last-minute ending, and for the longest time I thought it was the only horror film Bernard Rose had directed. Then I found Paper House. This is a strange movie, and one that does not feel the need to answer any of the questions that it raises, and instead leaves that up to the viewer to great effect. A young girl finds that when she goes to sleep, she begins to visit a house she has drawn, and that what she draws on the paper appears in the house in her dreams. Here she also meets a boy who can't walk. But as she continues to draw, more and more connection seems to form between her dream world and reality, and it proves to have dire consequences. I think I may have already said too much about it actually. This movie will confuse you. In fact, it seems quite determined to do so. It accomplishes a dreamlike atmosphere using practically nothing but a great set design, and doesn't cheat its way to that effect by fiddling with the lighting or putting it through some kind of effect filter. And it helps to blur the line between the dream and reality that much further. You won't find an answer to all your questions when the movie wraps up, but you will have had a bone-chilling experience, and definitely something to talk about with your friends for hours. God damn it, Bernard, we need more horror from you! Why it took me years to get around to watching this movie, I cannot tell you. But when I finally did watch it, I felt like slapping myself for it, because this is absolutely great. Tim Robbins plays a traumatized Vietnam War vet who is plagued by many a bad memory, but seems to at least have a somewhat decent life going for him. But that soon changes when he starts to have horrifying visions of demonic creatures coming after him no matter where he goes. Like with Paper House, even that feels like I'm revealing far too much. Jacob's Ladder is a movie that you should simply dive into and experience the same terrors that Jacob finds himself subject to during this story. It's hard to describe, but I will say this. The nightmarish visions as seen in this movie have been cited as some of the primary inspiration for a little video game series you might have heard of called Silent Hill. Which to me means that rather than going for something that has a conventionally scary appearance, this is a movie that knows the effect of something that just looks and feels wrong. It really is Robbins who carries this movie, as his performance is absolutely incredible. Not only are we completely convinced that he's terrified, but he also has a scene or two portraying some of the most real and convincing vulnerability I have ever seen. And for that, he deserves some goddamn applause. And once you get to the ends of this movie, you will realize that at the core of this tale of terror, there is a simple little message waiting for you that so many people need and deserve to learn. And now let's get to the only fairly recent movie on the list, Insidious. I was skeptical about getting around to watch this one, not because of the PG-13 rating. I'm among the few who don't assume that such a thing immediately means bad, apparently, but because of the hype. I found myself quite disappointed with the hype for certain horror films before, and I expected this to be no exception. And true enough, during the first act of the movie I was less than impressed, even if I acknowledged that it was well put together. And then it started to suck me in. People often compare this movie to Poltergeist, and sure, the basic setup and indeed some parts of the plot are very similar. However, Insidious manages to remain its own beast about it and keeps a consistently very dark tone, where Poltergeist, while definitely a damn good scary movie, seemed to have a sense of wicked gleefulness to it. Insidious, not so much. However, it does a great job averting many haunted house cliches, and though it's not the hardest twist to see coming, definitely changes the game halfway through. What's most impressive is how determined it is to justify its many, and very effective, jump scare scenes, as they never come out of nowhere and always serve some kind of purpose. It is, however, a bit of a polarizing movie in the aspect of how you like your supernatural horror. Do you prefer it to be mysterious, or do you want to know the specifics? Because this very much holds the viewer by the hand and leaves no questions to be asked, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It is a very visually impressive movie, and definitely nice to see James Wan not play it safe and stick to the torture aspect of Saw, or whatever it was that he did wrong with Dead Silence. I cannot for the life of me remember why I didn't particularly like that movie. Insidious not only proves that PG-13 horror can most definitely work, but it also proves that James Wan is more than a one-trick pony and is one to watch out for in the future. Keep it up, James. I love this movie so goddamn much. So far I've seen it 3 times, and it gives me the chills every time. Not because it brings any new surprises upon a rewatch, not because it's necessarily one of the most original films out there, and not because I don't watch enough ghost story movies. I get the chills every time because this movie does what it does so well and so right that it's a complete and utter horror joy. By all means, this particular movie has become my golden standard for ghost stories. The Changeling is the story of accomplished composer John Russell, who decides after having lost his wife and daughter in a tragic car crash to move into a new house where he can have peace of mind and work on his music, and more importantly, move on from the tragedy. But it's not long after he's moved in that strange things begin to happen and he realizes that the house is haunted, but not by who he thinks. It really is that simple, and proof of my claim that simplicity is key. There is no overly complicated supernatural plot at play here. There are no spectacular special effects or big rituals to be performed. There are no horrific curses. There are no complete reinventions of something that already works just fine. There's a man, there's a house, and there's a ghost. And that's all it needs to be a chillingly perfect example of something as timeless as a haunted house story. It's just good old-fashioned creepiness oozing out of the creaking walls, and hairs raising on your neck thanks to the mysterious noises. When you find out who and what the ghost is, you will feel uncomfortable. And by the end of the movie, you will feel something was accomplished. The Changeling is a brilliant little creepy tale, and one of my all-time favorites. Unfortunately, many viewers will be turned off by the slow build-up and the lack of jump scares, and it still remains one of the most sadly overlooked entries into a subgenre of horror that is so rarely successful. But like the ghost inside the house, this thing is a persistent spirit. It demands to be watched. Well, that's basically it for the 5 scariest movies I saw in 2011. I hope this has given you an idea or two of something to watch and that you will find as much creepy joy in them as I did. But remember, it's a personal list, and horror is a very subjective genre. If you disagree with this list, that's fine. I probably disagree with yours. But that doesn't make these choices of mine any different. Until next time, stay scared.